Hello and welcome to the news update on the Papyrus Global TV. I am Christiana Babayo. Here are the headlines. Court declares Nnamdi Kanu a terrorist, convicts Ipob leader on 3 counts. Former lawmaker petitions for Kanu's clemency and nationwide debate. Resident doctors reject Labour Ministry claims, say strike continues. FCTA to begin enforcement against land use ground rent defaulters. Chief of Army Staff orders troops to maintain vigilance, aggressive posture amid renewed attacks. 16 prospective corps members die in fatal accident en route to NYSC camp. Eruku church attack. Kidnappers place ₦100 million ransom on each of 38 abductees. And now the news in full. A federal high court in Abuja has convicted the leader of the proscribed indigenous people of Biafra, Ipob Nnamdi Kanu, finding him guilty on 3 terrorism-related counts in a high-profile trial that has gripped the nation. Justice James Omotosho delivered the ruling on November 20, 2025, concluding that prosecution evidence established Kanu's role in directing and encouraging activities that mounted to terrorism. The judgment follows months of contentious hearings that included testimony from masked witnesses and disputes over the admissibility of recorded statements. Prosecutors argue that Kanu's broadcasts and directives to IPOB members constituted a sustained campaign that incited violent attacks on security forces and civilians in part of the southeast. While the defense repeatedly challenged the chain of custody and credibility of key evidence, the court's findings mark a decisive moment in a long-running legal saga that began with Kanu's arrest in 2021 and his extradition to Nigeria. The conviction is likely to have significant political and legal reverberations. Supporters of Kanu and IPOB have framed the trial as politically motivated and have raised concerns about due process, while government authorities have portrayed the verdict as a vindication of efforts to stamp out violent secessionist agitation. International observers and regional actors will be watching for how the sentence is imposed and whether either side seeks further legal recourse. Amid the fallout from the conviction of Nnamdi Kanu, a former lawmaker has publicly appealed to President Bola Tinubu for clemency, arguing that granting mercy could reduce tensions and pave the way for reconciliation. The plea echoes earlier appeals by certain politicians and civic actors who have suggested that political solutions, rather than purely punitive measures, may better address long-standing grievances in the southeast. Supporters of clemency argued that a measured act of executive mercy could help diffuse a volatile environment and provide breathing space for dialogue. Critics, however, say that any such move risks appearing to reward violent agitation and could undermine the rule of law, especially in the eyes of security forces and victims of past attacks. The debate over clemency underscores the broader dilemma facing the federal government, balancing law enforcement with reconciliation in an atmosphere of heightened political sensitivity. The Nigerian Association of Resident Doctors has dismissed recent statements by the Federal Ministry of Labour and Employment as premature, insisting that their indefinite strike remains in force until demands are fully met. Association leaders said the ministry's release described progress in negotiations mounted to promises and committees without verifiable outcomes and therefore did not translate into a suspension of industrial action. NART's strike, which began on November 1, 2025, has severely disrupted medical services across federal teaching hospitals and specialist centers, prompting urgent public concern over access to emergency and critical care. Doctors said their core demands include improved remuneration, implementation of prior agreements on allowances, and actionable measures to address workplace safety and training conditions. The association warned that until concrete documented agreements are reached and implemented, the strike will persist. Health sector stakeholders and patient advocacy groups have voiced alarm at the continuing disruption, calling for accelerated, transparent engagement between the government and doctors' representatives to avert further loss of lives and systemic deterioration in public health provision. The Federal Capital Territory Administration has announced that it will commence enforcement operations against defaulters of ground rent, land use, land use change fees, and outstanding right of occupancy and certificate of occupancy charges when from Wednesday, November 26, 2025. The FCTA said notices have been issued and properties with unresolved bills will be targeted for remedial actions under the administration's revenue recovery and urban management strategy. Officials framed the enforcement as an effort to ensure fairness and adherence to the territory's land management laws, while also shoring up internally generated revenue used for urban services. The FCTA's public communications team said the action will be guided with due process, with defaulters given windows to regularize their accounts before stronger sanctions apply. Nonetheless, the move is expected to generate concern among property owners and developers, particularly those who had expected further administrative leniency during economic hardship. The Chief of Army Staff, Lieutenant General Waidi Shaibu, has warned troops to sustain high level of vigilance and maintain an aggressive posture as operations continue against insurgents and terrorist groups. During a visit to the Joint Task Force Northeast Operation Hadinkai headquarters in Maiduguri, the Chief of Army Staff urged field commanders to guard against complacency and to prioritize intelligence-led operations. The directive comes amid a series of renewed attacks in the northeast and other trouble spots and follows operational assessments intended to review logistics, troop, troop morale, and theater command coordination. Army leadership emphasized that a calibrated mixture of offensive operations, community engagements, and force protection measures is needed to deny insurgents safe havens and to restore safe living conditions for affected populations. We will now go on a short break, and when we come back, the news will continue. Stay tuned.
The Papyrus Global, we don't just cover events, we create cinematic experiences. From red carpets to birthdays, gala dinners, and your fairy tale weddings, we bring your moments to life with high-tech precision. Our gadgets are smarter, our lenses sharper, and our team simply world-class. Trust the Papyrus Global to tell your story in the boldest, brightest way possible.
Welcome back, and now the news will continue. 16 graduates flagged as prospective corps members tragically lost their lives in a road accident while traveling to the NYSC Service Corps orientation camp in Gombe State. Reports indicate 2 survivors were taken to hospital in critical condition. The victims were identified as graduates of Adeyemi Federal University of Education in Ondo State, according to preliminary accounts from the officials and witnesses. The incident had prompted calls for road safety audits and tighter transport regulations for school and group travel, with families and tertiary institutions seeking swift investigations into the cause of such crash and assurances about the welfare of survivors. NYC officials were reported to be coordinating the state emergency responders to provide assistance and to verify the identities of victims. In a disturbing development from Kwara State, kidnappers who attacked a church in Iruku have reportedly placed a 100 million naira ransom demand on each of the 38 abductees during the raid. Sources said the demand represents a combined ransom expectation running into the billions of naira and has heightened fears among families and communities desperate for swift government action. The attack has drawn widespread condemnation and intensified pressure on security agencies to rescue the abducted victims and to bring perpetrators to justice. Authorities have reportedly launched operations in the surrounding forest belts and are coordinating with local vigilante groups for intelligence-driven tracking. Community leaders, faith organizations, and civil society have urged restraint from uncoordinated rescue attempts that could endanger hostages, while pressing for clear timelines and regular updates from security agencies. And that's all we have on the news update from Papyrus Global TV. My name is Christiana Babayo. Thanks for joining us.